So joining us now to talk a little bit more about this and, in fact, about a lot of things having to do with the Biden agenda is CBS News political contributor Molly Hooper. Because, Molly, there are a lot of things kind of hanging in the air that we talk about, you know, on a daily basis for a few weeks, and then they stall and we just go on to another topic. So we're going to try to hit as many of these as possible. Today, the Senate will begin to debate legislation combining the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Just give us the lay of the land. Where do things stand right now when it comes to voting rights legislation?
Well, all in all, again, this is really important to remember that the Senate, in order to pass this legislation, essentially to get onto the legislation, the Senate needs 60 votes, which means 10 Republicans will have to vote with Democrats to move on to general debate of this legislation. And really what we're facing right now is sort of a Hail Mary pass that Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, is going to be throwing to his own party to say, let's get rid of that requirement so that we can move on to voting rights reform. And what he's going to do later this week is he's going to put that question, essentially, should we remove the filibuster for voting rights legislation? He's going to put that question to the Senate, which means that since there's 50 Democrats, all 50 Democrats would need to vote in favor of that, and Vice President Kamala Harris would essentially cast her vote in favor of that and break the tie. But thus far, already we've seen Joe Manchin, Democrat, West Virginia, Kirsten Sinema from Arizona, Democrat, saying that they are not going to vote to change or end the filibuster required, the cloture motion required to move on to general debate. It's a long-standing practice in the Senate, and they say that they're not going to do it. So as it stands, it looks like voting rights legislation, the voting rules legislation that's going to be on the Senate floor this week, doesn't have a very good chance of passing at the moment.
Yeah, so if you don't have that, then you're probably not going to get around to voting rights legislation. Kamala Harris actually talked about Senator Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and their lack of desire to move forward on filibuster legislation. I want to play some of what the Vice President had to say.
It is time for the United States Senate to do its job. A landmark bill, as we all know, sits before the United States Senate, the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act. This bill represents the first real opportunity to secure the freedom to vote since the United States Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act nearly a decade ago. And the Senate must pass this bill now.
So I can't think of anything that would cause Senators Sinema and Manchin to have a change of heart on the filibuster rule. So given that fact, is there any way around it for Democrats to pass this legislation?
Well, the Democrats are thinking, they're trying to come up with some different ideas to change the rules so that they don't necessarily get rid of the filibuster outright, but that they change it to make it more difficult to filibuster. Instead of requiring 60 votes in favor of moving on to a bill like the Voting Rights Act, Democrats are thinking, let's require the 40 votes to be present in the chamber opposing that, moving on to the legislation. Because right now, if you oppose going on to general debate, say that I was a Republican, I wouldn't even have to show up. The votes that count in those votes would be the 60 that are there. So Democrats are saying, well, maybe we could change the rules that way. Maybe we could change the rules so that we go back to the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, that famous scene of him holding the Senate floor for days on end, it seemed like, a talking filibuster, requiring that the individual who wants to filibuster the legislation must actually be on the Senate floor talking and holding the floor and then moving to a vote. But as it stands, again, Senators Manchin and Sinema don't seem necessarily open to those rules changes. And here's why, and it's very important to point this out. Because if they change the rules right now, who's to say, and this is just Kirsten Sinema's argument, who's to say that when Republicans eventually come back into power one day in the future and there's a Republican president, Republicans won't do the exact same thing and undo everything that the Democrats voted for in terms of voting reform. And so that's what, is the main, holding the main block right now that Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are facing. They're saying, if we do this now, like we did back in 2013 when we changed the rules of the road for nominations and ended the filibuster for nominations, the Republicans will do it to us. And that, like they did in 2017, which made it that much easier to approve Justices Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett when former President Trump was in office. So that, again, it has to do with looking towards the future as opposed to just being in the now, the here and now.
Right. Was it Ted Cruz that did green eggs and ham during a filibuster? Is that it? Am I remembering correctly?
Well, he was trying to filibuster health care reform, and it wasn't as successful as one might think. And I'm not even sure his twins heard him reading the green eggs and ham because it was so late at night.
Yeah. I think another rule should be you should be on topic. You're not allowed to just say anything you want for hours on end and hold everything up. Listen, before I let you go, I want to ask you about another huge part of the president's agenda, the Build Back Better agenda. Last we heard, Joe Manchin still was opposed to the bill. He doesn't like how much it costs. What is happening with that? Are they perhaps talking about passing elements of it if they can't pass the whole thing?
Well, they are talking about elements, but again, right now, the big hang-up is voting rights. And it's so interesting because it seemed like the big hang-ups to voting rights was the Build Back Better bill, which actually irked a lot of voting rights activists back in the end of the last summer and early fall. But yes, they are talking about a few elements passing. It's just unclear as to where they go from now, because I think that once Senators Sinema and Manchin put their foot down and said, hey, we're not changing the filibuster, the White House sort of had to recalibrate how they approach those senators. And, we'll see. Stay tuned, as they say.
All right. We certainly will, Molly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.